Great. Hello, everyone. So great to see everyone. So I see a few people trickling in, so I'm going to give them a few more minutes and then we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to wait until we have 50 participants and then we can start the session. You know what? Let's just kick things off now. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our first virtual career panel, Starting Your Career in Cybersecurity. My name is Ying Sel, and I'm the project manager for the Cyber NYC Internship program. I realize that I'm still sharing my screen, so let me go ahead and stop sharing. Perfect. So today we are super excited because we have three incredible cybersecurity experts here today to talk about the various opportunities available in this field and the skills you need for these roles. We'd like to take a moment now to thank our panelists, Fabiana Rodriguez Mercado, Sarah Morales, and Aussie Monroe for making time to be here today. We would also like to thank Brian Schoikit, Dara Siegel, and Nina Chin from the New York City Economic Development Corporation for supporting this initiative. Before we get started, though, we do have a few housekeeping items to share with you all. Please note that this event is being recorded and we're currently live streaming it on YouTube. We will also be reserving the last 15 minutes for Q&A, so please think of some questions to ask our panelists and feel free to send them in anytime through the Zoom chat, and we will address those questions during the end of our meeting. You also have the option to virtually raise your hand during our Q&A to ask your question. All right, so enough with the logistics. I know that all of you here are here to hear from our panelists. I said here multiple times. So let's switch gears and start with panel introductions. Fabiana, would you like to kick things off by sharing with the audience your current role, responsibilities it entails, and a brief summary of your career path up to this point?
Of course, thank you so much for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Fabiana Rodriguez, and I'm a Chief of Staff Business Manager at Citibank for a cybersecurity organization. It is one of the 7 pillars of cybersecurity, and they're overseeing headcount, financials, and communications. So it's primarily a non-technical role within a cybersecurity organization. A little bit about me and my journey to get here. Everything started when I was a social media consultant right after college, and one of my clients got hacked. And that got me interested into this world to understand how to protect businesses. That was many years ago. It was about 2014, 2015-ish. And it took some time to define the journey to merge business with technology. So I will focus primarily in that area. But yeah, so my background is in business and marketing. Then I studied several boot camps in cybersecurity and tech support. That's how I got started in the industry. And then I transitioned to project management and then business management. So it's a journey. So I'm very excited to walk you through it and get to know also the other panelists.
Aussie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you all for having me. I apologize. My throat's a little bit raspy today. I spent a weekend up playing cornhole with a bunch of people at like a cornhole competition, so I'm suffering. But Aussie Monroe, I'm Deputy CISO over here at Bloomberg LP. I've been here at the company for a very long time, since 1990. I also run a team of information security officers as well, who provide oversight and partner up with various key lines of businesses here at Bloomberg. my journey is, one that's not the sort of normal path that's taken to a deputy CISO role. I started here at the company in 1990 as an intern, right after I got out of the serving 4 years in the Air Force, which I did right after high school. Did not go to college, had no formal college training or education. I started here and just sort of moved from an internship to customer service and then into a couple of technical roles here, and finally made my way into security as a project manager. And then that sort of spun into a program manager role in the CTO security department. And from there, I moved over to the CISO organization, leading when I started and built a team of information security officers. And then from there, I managed earlier this year to get the title of deputy CISO. So for those of you out there that might be concerned about having a non-technical sort of background or a non-security focused background, there is a path for you all to sort of make it to where you want to be. And like Fabiana said, I'm looking forward to providing you all with some information and getting to hear from some of you with any of the Q&A. So I look forward to this.
Thanks, Aussie. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining at 6 o'clock on a Monday. If you're proud of yourselves, you're already at one step closer to your journey. My name is Sarah Morales. I am a senior program manager at Google in our privacy, safety, and security engineering team. This is home to one of Google's kind of big cybersecurity teams. So as all of you are probably learning about the field, the detection and response, enterprise, infrastructure, platform, all those big security teams sit within my team at Google. I'm actually on a team that sounds similar to Fabiana's. It's a strategy and operations team. And my program management is focused on how Google is engaging externally with the larger cybersecurity industry. So looking at how we're partnering with organizations, kind of like what we are here today, how we're helping to grow the next generation of cybersecurity professionals, how we're sharing some of our expertise and interacting with the public, the industry, and our different partners. My career path, I think it's really interesting. We all kind of don't have the exact career path that I think people would think about in cybersecurity. I actually studied environmental science in upstate New York. I'm actually home now on Long Island, but I live in San Francisco. But I studied environmental science, lived in New York City, and worked at an environmental nonprofit that was along the East River. And then I moved out to California, but it was during a recession, which is usually not the best time to move, but I was young, so I didn't really think about that. And when I got there, most of the jobs I could find were only in tech. So I actually started working at some small tech startups, actually focusing on what we call community management, which is kind of like customer support, but also engaging your community members. And from there, I worked at a couple different places and then found my way into Google in our consumer support team. So if you ever have to look up a question of like, what the heck's going on with my Gmail, like where you and how you see those responses, kind of the team that manages that. Then I had my first child and I was commuting really far and I was not ready for the suburbs. So I actually looked for roles in our San Francisco office and happened to find a program manager within the cybersecurity team. Within that, I became really interested and was able to actually transfer my skills. So thinking about how I'm engaging with the public and with consumers and kind of channel that into cybersecurity. And so I think we'll be talking about transferable skills a little bit more today. But I was able to get onto this team. They gave me a chance and actually learn cybersecurity on the go. And I've really enjoyed this space. I think it's ever changing learning and people are really into sharing their knowledge. And so I was able to actually take a lot of what I learned, did some trainings also, and then and still here on this team and watched it grow.
I love that. Thank you all for sharing. I think it's also really great for our audience today to hear that all of you have non-traditional backgrounds, especially when people think about cybersecurity. Many of them think that you need to have graduate from a college degree with computer science or information technology background. But I love the fact that all of you have been able to merge the business side of of things and technology into your roles. So moving on, many of our attendees tonight are either currently enrolled or have graduated from a college, university, or a cybersecurity bootcamp like Full Stack Academy. We also have folks who are pivoting careers and learning on their own through platforms like Coursera and Udemy, and the list goes on. So despite their trajectory, what they all have in common is that they're all searching for ways to break into the cybersecurity industry. So panelists, what guidance do you have for people wanting to get their first job in cybersecurity? And please feel free to jump in.
I can jump in. As an alumni of Full Stack Academy and also for scholars, getting started was the most difficult part for me. So my guidance is always get started somewhere. What I mean by that is sometimes the role that is presented to you in technology, the first ever one, is not the most shiny, perfect one. And I think Sarah had mentioned like how she got in and the transferable skills. So my first tech job was as a tech support analyst. First, I did a not-for-profit for about 4 months. And then I joined a bootcamp with Full Stack, and then I had the opportunity with Accenture. But that wouldn't have started unless I was a volunteer in a not-for-profit doing tech support. And then once I entered in Accenture, I had already my goals of like, okay, how can I leverage this opportunity and keep moving into cybersecurity? And it happened that my second tech role was in cybersecurity too. But I jumped into that because it was during the pandemic, and having the opportunity to work remote sounded great. So I jumped into that. It was a fantastic position to be during the pandemic. I was supporting all the virtual meetings globally, especially for our thought leaders. So it was a very interesting position for me with my marketing background and then understanding technology support. So it was awesome to having different hats. So little by little, that got me more access to more cybersecurity professionals. So yeah, I always start with that. You need to get started somewhere in technology, and it could be infrastructure, network, project management. And as you get more used to the vocabulary in the industry, you will get exactly where you want to be. What about you, Sarah?
Thanks. Yeah, I think to build on that, think about a lot of what types of work do you enjoy to do, right? Do you like actually coding, right? Are you studied computer science or took a boot camp and like coding? That's a certain pathway. Do you like problem solving, right? Do you like bringing people together or communications, right? This field is actually much bigger than just pen testing. Right? There's people who are doing detection and response and have to write the incident reporting. There are people who work in PR who actually sometimes are more technical than the engineers are, right? They need to alert the public when a breach happens or some sort of new threat is out there. There are roles in doing assessments or in risk analysis. So I would think a lot about what type of work do you like to do? What types of things do you like to spend your day on? And then how might that apply to the field? I think in general, some people are starting to do it right in the chat. Networking is really important. So attend these events, attend in person, reach out to people on LinkedIn, listen and follow industry news. There's a number of ways, like the Washington Post has a daily email that's free. You don't have to sign up for it, called like the 201 or 202, where it gives you emails daily on what's going on in the field. I think staying up to date and knowing what's emerging is really important in this space. And that's a good way to see, oh, okay, this is happening here. Maybe there's some opportunities there. And then I think lastly is, a lot of companies have the ability to sign up if you're really just on the job hunt for job alerts. I'm sure both Bloomberg City and Google all have ways to sign up for job alerts. Check on LinkedIn for recruiters. Lots of people will do informational interviews and talk with you about the work. And so I think both understanding what you're interested in, meeting people, understanding the field, and kind of keeping an eye out for what you want to do. And also realize your first job might not be perfect, but it might get you in, kind of like Fabiana was saying, get you in. and then help you figure out, okay, actually, I want to pivot a little more over to this side because like I don't really want to do that risk assessment anymore, or something else that might make an opportunity there. Aussie?
I really don't have much to add. Those two answers are so fantastic. I'll echo a couple of the things though. Really staying in tune to what's going on in the information security industry is a key part of sort of growing your knowledge base, and letting other people, and the networking piece as well, is getting connected to people out there and letting people know who you are, and your interest in information security is key as well. I think to go along with that, one of the key aspects I think for anybody in security is staying inquisitive, like questioning everything. Like it's so important, especially when you're in you don't have a technology background. You're not a technologist by sort of trade or by your education. Understanding that if you learn about a new application or a new product or a new technology, just understanding how that works and always questioning it. I think that's a key to that's a key to folks that are looking for individuals. And we're in an industry where it's a weird industry, right? It's a very young industry, and it's one of the very few industries where you can come in and be formally educated, but you can also make a pathway without that formal education. And there's not very many industries like that. If you want to become, if you want to go into finance, or if you want to become a doctor, and the list goes on, you typically need to go to school and get some, proper education in those. But there's a lot you can do on your own in information security and technology. There's a lot of online sites like Hack the Box and Try Hack Me, where you can leverage to sort of play around on your own time. You don't need to build a lab on your own, but excuse me. But playing around in those spaces shows that you are interested, and if you just, like I said, remain inquisitive, question everything, and always look for the next answer. All right, so this application integrates well with this other application, or doesn't integrate well, but why, right? What's the underlying reason why two applications may not integrate? There might be another technology underneath, and you just kind of work your way down that stack or up that stack, depending on which way you're looking at the stack. And you question it and sort of build your, like I said before, build your knowledge base that way. So yeah, I think that's key aspects to what we look for when we look for entry-level folks in any of the information security positions.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I love the fact that all three of you, like everyone on the panel, pointed out the importance of staying up to date with new trends in the field. I'm curious to know, and I'm sure the audience is wondering as well, what are specific ways for cyber professionals to stay up to date with the latest developments and practices in the cybersecurity industry? Do any of you follow any influencers on LinkedIn or Quora, even, because I know some people do that? Or are there any sites or publications that you use to stay up to date? Sarah, I remember you mentioning the Washington Post, but if y'all could expand on that further, that'd be great.
I can just jump in. Yeah, I immersing yourself in the space is key, as Sarah mentioned. I think I hesitate to mention Twitter because Twitter seems to be dying on the vine here, but there are tons of folks on Twitter, or a lot of people have moved over to Threads now. But there are tons of information security professionals, well respected in the industry, that put out good information. If you get a curated list of who those individuals are, then following, what they tweet out, or the information or articles that they put out, is key. Also, finding good podcasts, I think, it's key for me. I really enjoy listening to podcasts. There's one that I can refer everyone to. It's called Risky.biz. A couple of Australian guys that put on they have various different sort of avenues for their podcast. They have a weekly sort of one where they go over like news in the information security industry. They have one where they're upfront with everybody, and it's a sponsored segment where folks that sponsor the program come on and talk about their products. But they also talk about products. At least the risky.biz folks will also speak about other competing products in the space. But that's a good way to sort of understand, in a particular space, who are the players in that, and that's key as well. You don't have to be, like we mentioned when we started, you don't have to be a technologist. You don't have to have a technology background. But if you're not going to be a technologist, I think what's key is understanding who plays in the space that you're sort of interested in. If you're talking about, PAM solutions or password vaults or, identity access management, understanding the various vendors that play in that space is also going to be key to maybe landing yourself a role in information security. So I would say, what works for me is reading articles, as Sarah's also mentioned, Twitter and podcasts as well.
Adding up on what Aussie just shared, I was thinking staying up to date is one of the biggest challenges in our industry. Things change so quickly. And by the time someone writes a book, that's a whole, like an old story. So for me, my number one is my network. So reaching out, always staying in conversations, and it's that daily conversation. Do you hear? Do you know? Number two, the networking as well in person, but also virtually, keeping engaged with different professionals in the industry and asking them, okay, what is your challenge? How things are going? And could be, sometimes you're in cybersecurity. For example, in my case, I'm in a bank, but you hear other people, let's say, in a media company, or they're in a startup, and hearing what they're dealing with is very interesting to know where the industry is going. And because my role is non-technical and I deal a lot with business management, I subscribe to Business Harvard Review, and it's been very helpful. A lot of times I'm like, I'm dealing exactly with this problem, and that's been very insightful for me. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I would say about the same. In-person conferences, or like even if I don't attend them, just seeing kind of what are keynote talks and things like that. Like I mentioned, that one mailing list, and I think Axios Codebook is another one. It's sometimes sponsored, sometimes not. I'll look at that. Sometimes listen to podcasts. Usually I keep podcasts to things that are non-work, just for myself. But and I don't think I have too much else. Twitter, I do try, but I sometimes also just get overwhelmed. So I think, yeah, usually top line conferences, a couple of those newsletters, and then similar Fabiana and my peers, like when I see people posting on LinkedIn or within my own networks within my company, a lot of like kind of news is brought in the space I work. So that is one for me, as well as just kind of in my networks within my work environment.
The one thing that I wanted to add there is, it's really helpful for me. So I use like an application Feedly that sort of pulls in from, once you sort of get that curated list of, the people on Twitter or news organizations that put out articles, like pulling them into a central location is really helpful. And I know you're probably thinking, well, Twitter does that, so why pull them in? But this also pulls from other sources, website articles that are published as well. But I think the key part there is, in order to get a good Feedly sort of link of good information sources, having a curated list, and like Fabiana and Sarah both mentioned, like use your network to find out like what are the sort of reputable sources, right? Because there are tons of people out there that put out information that's going to be a lot of noise, and you can spend a lot of time reading, stuff that's not so great. Also, the one other bit of advice I would give is sort of narrow your lens a little bit. Trying to read everything all at once. There's so much information out there in information security. So I would say narrow the lens if you're, want to focus on ransomware, or you want to focus on, APTs, or if you want to focus on a specific area or technology, I would focus the lens on that, at least initially. You can switch off of that at any point, but broadening the lens too much can get a little overwhelming at times.
See, I can definitely relate to that because sometimes I have like 20 tabs open and they're all from like the New York Times or Twitter, and it's just a lot to take in. So we do have a panelist question from Sarah to Aussie. Aussie, would you be able to share what a CISO is and what you do basically?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give you a cheeky response. The CISO is the one who's on the hook when something happens to your company. That's the individual that's going to be, responding to regulators or sitting in front of Congress, testifying to what went wrong. But the non-cheeky answer is, CISO is the Chief Information Security Officer that's responsible for the information security of the company that you work for, right? And depending on the company, that's sliced different ways. Even the sort of structure, the reporting structure is sliced differently depending on what company you're at. Being that information security is a fairly new industry, the role of CISO is fairly new as well. And I think it's still getting to a better place. And what I mean by that is today, you don't see a lot of CISOs that report into sort of the board or into the CEO for that case. A lot of them, it's usually structured where there are one or two levels between the CEO and the CISO in a lot of organizations. But I feel that's changing, and I feel that's, it's evolving, and especially since across many industries, we're moving into highly more regulated industries, where regulators are looking and expecting more from companies as far as, excuse me, as far as information security is concerned. They're starting to hold executives and board members accountable, senior executives, for what happens in their organizations as far as information security is concerned. And you only have to look as far as the SolarWinds example and the most recent the article where the SEC is filing civil charges against several of the C-level executives to hold them accountable for lack of controls and not reporting some of the information that they about the SolarWinds hack in a timely manner. So I think typically in any organization, also the CISO department usually consists of several key sub-teams. There's a cybersecurity operations center. There's usually like a threat and vulnerability management team. There is product security, and those are all sliced up. Within each one, they're sliced up several different ways. But those are sort of the key components of most CISO organizations. And on a day-to-day, it's really, to be a CISO, you have to be comfortable with never being comfortable. You have, at any given time, something can happen within your organization that turns into a fire drill, or it doesn't even really have to impact your organization. It could be something that's just within the industry, like when SolarWinds breaks or Log4j, and you then have to scramble to sort of understand the impact to your company and make sure you report that appropriately to the senior executives and make sure you have mitigating controls, or if you are impacted, that you remediate in a timely fashion. So wasn't really joking, although it was a cheeky comment. I wasn't really joking about the fact that the CISO is the one on the hook and the one accountable.
Thanks so much, Aussie. Fabiana, I noticed in the Zoom chat that you agreed with Aussie's statement that cybersecurity regulations are changing. Is that something that you're noticing in the financial industry, or at least in at Citibank?
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially for highly regulated organizations, but this is something that will continue changing, especially what Ozzy was talking about, how this CISO reports nowadays may be to a CTO or like a chief technology officer or an innovation officer. seeing organizations that now are giving a seat to security directly to a CEO and the board members. That will continue changing as the regulations keep changing and impacting many industry, not only banks. But yes, there are new regulations. Actually, something came up in April. We'll look for the link and share it right here. I was reading it a couple of days ago, so I hope that I can find it. But definitely a lot of changes are happening in the industry that will shape and reshape the roles that we're having today.
And Sarah, is that something that you see at Google as well?
Yeah, I mean, that affects any business, right? And
Mhm.
also, there's obviously by country as well. And so you'll see that with both, data security practices, privacy practices. I just posted a link too. I think a good place for folks to also keep an eye is the current U.S. government also has a number of offices. They have the traditional ones that'll always have security roles, like Department of Defense, FBI, NSA, but also the Biden administration set up the ONCD. I don't know what it stands for off the top of my head, but that is the name of ONCD. I'll find the link afterwards, which is out of the White House, and CISA. CISA, I'll post that link there too, is one of the government organizations that is focused on cybersecurity practices. And so these are great career paths. We can get into that a little later too. But both those organizations also put out a lot of news. And so that's an important place to keep up. So this linking that I just put is the government came out with a strategy of how they want, to improve I think all businesses, please, both Fabiana or Aussie, correct me, but on how the government should be updating cybersecurity policy and how they want to see the U.S. Better practices. So they're advocating for a lot of cybersecurity best practices, like things like you'll hear something called secure by default, right? So how businesses should be run. And so those are good places to see. Obviously, they're kind of written very traditionally. They're not going to read like a blog as much, but important to see of like, oh, okay, well, now this is coming out. Like a lot of companies are going to have to respond. We'll be thinking about this. A lot of times those companies were advised on it. So that's an important, and my kid showed up. But that's an important place to keep an eye too, as you're thinking about this field.
Definitely. And attendees, if you are unable to jot down any of these insights, don't worry, because we are recording the session, so we can send you this video at a later time. So as I mentioned during the start of our panel, our program applicants have taken various routes to make their way into cybersecurity. So some have graduated from college, some have not. Others have certificates, while others are trying to possess the technical skills elsewhere through, again, like Coursera, Udemy, et cetera. Panelists, how important are credentials, like a college degree or certifications when entering this field? And also, are there any specific certifications that you recommend our applicants to look into?
I can jump in here and go first, because this is always a question that it's a little unsettling for me, because I'm not a big certifications guy, right? I think I've acquired maybe less than a handful, maybe 2 or 3 certifications in my career. I also did not go to college. I went straight from high school to the Air Force and then started working here. So my experience is a little bit different. I mean, it's one that can sort of show individuals that there is an opportunity to carve a path without having certifications, but I always really hesitate to give that advice out there, because although I don't put a heavy emphasis on that when I look at resumes, I got to be honest, I don't even look at the certifications, but that's just a personal thing because it's my own experience. And the reason why I hesitate giving advice or giving the advice that certification is not important is because there are a lot of folks that are hiring managers that have the opposite opinion. So I don't want to give the advice to say, oh, you don't need any certifications, and then you end up not prioritizing that and not landing jobs because of that. That being said, there are tons of different ones out there that that I think can apply, but I think that's really, to sort of narrow down a list, it depends on what area you're looking to focus in information security. If there are broad sort of certifications like CISSP, just to name one, but then there are other ones that are more narrowly focused. And then there's a bunch of paths to getting some sort of, some good schools out there where you can get sort of individual certifications. SANS is a great school that gives you an opportunity to sort of have that more narrowed focus lens on a particular area, like penetration testing or red teaming or some other more refined focus within the information security field. So that's sort of my advice. I think there are ways that you can go out and get certifications, but there is a path forward if you don't have the certifications. But just disclaimer, I'm not giving that as advice. I'm just saying that there's a pathway forward if you don't have it, or you're not built that way. Because I think, one thing that happens in this country, and maybe in other countries as well, but we put such an emphasis on education. Our education system is sort of very neatly defined, and if you don't fall within that box and you don't test well, then you just kind of get put in this other box where you're given this label of maybe not being as smart, or not being able to sort of compete and maintain some sort of pace with the folks that are getting the good grade in certain courses. So I think it's important to understand that there's an avenue and different ways to sort of learn. And I think the most important part there, I'd have to go back to my original response about staying inquisitive and showing that, is you can walk into an interview or you can have a conversation with someone and not have any certifications, but if you're able to sort of speak to your domain and your expertise and show that you know your stuff, then I think that is just as important and can be weighed just as heavily as having a ton of certifications.
I will follow up on that. Ozzy, I also hesitate once people ask me, like, what certification should I do? And I do not feel comfortable advising people that they should do certifications. However, I did myself, and I will explain a little bit how it worked. The first program that I joined to start my tech career is called Perscolas, and the model they use is through certifications. A+ and Net+. A+ is for tech support, and Network Plus is for networking roles. And that's the framework that worked. I got into the program, that's what you do. You may pass the exam or not, but that's the curriculum they use. So I did that. And at that time, that was in 2019, I was committed to do cybersecurity. So the next certification in line with CompTIA was Security Plus. So I did it. So I was kind of like in this tunnel where I was like, okay. And then I did another program with Full Stack Academy, and they also use certifications as the backbone of their bootcamp. So I needed to pass the CISA Plus to graduate from Full Stack Academy. With all this said, I went from one program to another where each one of them required me to pass a certification. They also support me on that, right? There were classes, there were where to practice. But as I complete them, I realized that they're all tools, and all the material you get from the certifications is out there for free. All you're doing once you do the exam is that you're showing that you can sit for 3-4 hours, cramp a lot of information. A lot of times the certifications are not inexpensive. I would say in the lower end, maybe around $200, but some of them that can get to $500. In the chat, we mentioned CSSP is much more expensive than that. You need experience to get to that certification. Also in the chat was mentioned the SANS. Those cost thousands of dollars. That's why it's like, I don't suggest going that route unless you have an employer that pays for it. And I remember a mentor told me that he has so many certifications and he works in the healthcare system. And he told me, I do certifications, number one, because my employer pays for it. And number two, because it's required for my role. No other reason. So you need to ask yourself why I'm doing the certification, because it's not the ultimate goal. And lastly, what I want to share, similar to what Ozzy said, is that hiring managers may look at a resume and say, okay, you have a certification, that's cool, but that's not the determinant. There is not going to be, you don't have the certification, I don't want to talk to you. They're looking at a most holistic way on your resume. So if you feel like I have to do a certification when you may have other things going on your resume, that's not the correct approach. So do you have anything else to add, Sarah?
Yeah, I think to build on your last point, I think it's seen as a signal, but it's not everything, right? Employers, many, especially the frontline recruiters, right? Once you get to Aussie, right, he's going to be really asking you questions when you work for him, right? But the first line recruiter might look to see that, right? The screening, right? Most, if you're going to a big company, there's likely someone before you get to the hiring manager or before you get to talk to someone. So I don't. And at Google, like, it's not a requirement, just like a bachelor's degree isn't a requirement either, or work experience, but all those things, can give signals. So if you are trying to transition, it can give a signal. Like I went through Perscolis Academy, right? Like you spent the time learning it, right? These are places that you can also try out different parts. So I just linked Google, just did a certificate. Ours is really kind of focused on that, helping people get an entry point into the field. It's on Coursera, so it's on demand, right? Many of these programs, the SANS Institute, as you mentioned, is very expensive, but they do offer scholarships and academies at certain points. So I keep an eye out for some of those. I think these are all ways to like figure out what you want to do and show a signal that you're really interested in this field. But it's not the only way to do that, right? A big way to do that is to just participate in conferences, go out and be involved in things called like capture the flags, which are usually more technical, but online challenges that you can do. Explore programs like this, like an internship program. There's different efforts called like cyber clinics that are now getting set up that you can volunteer and learn more and practice some of your cyber skills. So I think it's, credentials, like in most fields, there'll be a signal, but they're not the end all be all. If you are looking into the government, there are oftentimes past exams and levels you'll need to pass if you want to go kind of that route. But I think keep it all also like kind of what we've been saying the whole time. Keep in mind what you enjoy, what you're interested in, and then kind of see within that field what's most important for those roles. And, look at people's LinkedIn profiles and see what they linked. And some of them you're going to get later on. As mentioned, CISSP, that's the most well-known one out there. I don't know if I don't have that. I don't know if anyone else here does. But that one also takes time, right? You actually have to prove job experience. So some of these you might get later on once you're already within the field. There's also stages of your career where that stuff kind of falls to the side anyway. But I think it's signal, but it's not everything, would be kind of my summary.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Aussie.
The one other piece that I wanted to sort of, because Sarah brought it up and it sort of reminded me of something, programs and organizations like this are key, and they're especially key because this industry is very sort of, it's driven by particular gender and a particular sort of, demographic when you look at across like the diversity of individuals that are in information security. And Sarah and I have crossed paths many times working with other nonprofit organizations where underrepresented groups there's a focus on information security and sort of helping underrepresented groups. And I mentioned that because, programs like this are key, and they're key in sort of giving an opportunity to individuals that might not, to Fabiana's point, might not be able to afford to either go to college or afford to take like a SANS course or afford to get a CISP or any other type of certification, because it is expensive. So leveraging programs like this are important. And then also, once you get established, paying it back to the community is also important as well, because I think we're an industry, first of all, where there's a shortage of talent globally in this industry in information security. And this industry needs to sort of challenge itself to think outside of the box and look in places like this organization and like some of the nonprofits that Sarah and I do work for, to sort of expand the diversity of the industry and to give an opportunity to those individuals that might fall, out of the sort of the category of having the economic means to be able to get these certifications. So I think it's really important to sort of find these types of programs, and there's a really good opportunity through these programs to leverage them and get what you need and get your foot in the door. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but I just wanted to kind of state that point.
Hasi, we really appreciate the shout out. So thank you for that. I wanted to reserve the last 15 minutes, and now we see that we have 13 minutes for Q&A. So audience members, please feel free to ask your questions in the Zoom chat. Until then, I'm going to go ahead and talk about skill set. So because of the competitive nature of the job market, especially in tech, many of the folks who apply for the same roles have the same skills and backgrounds. So I'm curious to know, are there any examples of candidates that you've hired in the past who really differentiated themselves in their application or during the interview process?
Can I just, I want to give an answer, but I want to give a sort of the reverse sort of to the question that you asked. I can't give you anything in particular where somebody's differentiated themselves, but what I can give you is a little bit of advice for anybody out there putting a resume together. When I look at a resume, if that resume has any spelling errors or grammatical errors, to me, that's done. That resume is gone immediately, because that's the one thing that everyone can control. And I like to refer to as sort of pride of ownership, pride of work, and anything that you're putting in front of someone else should be sort of thoroughly checked, right? Should be free of any formatting errors, spelling errors. So I think that's the one thing that can immediately, as me personally, I'm telling you that's going to immediately throw you off of the list. But I'm sure there are a lot of other folks that sort of share that same sentiment. So I would start off, and make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best light so that you're not immediately disqualified. I can't think of anything on the opposite side of that might be able to differentiate you and put you above anyone else. That really comes to me in the interview. These resumes are all, obviously someone is going to maybe stand out over the next person because of the experience that they've had, the places they've worked. Maybe they outline some of the projects they've worked on, which may be of particular interest to me and my company. But there's nothing really, in a resume style or anything like that that's going to jump out to me. So I would say to jump out, no, but to immediately get disqualified, yes, there are things there that you should look out for.
To build on that, and then I know someone has their hand up. I help some with our recruiting team, but I'm not a recruiter myself. And I'll be honest, I do kind of general interviews, but I don't usually see the resume first. But I did check in with our recruiting team, and a couple of points that they stood out to me when I talked to them is one, talk about numbers and impact versus like your responsibilities and like the tasks you did. And you can call out things that, don't, even if you're newer to your career or career transition, like things like open source contributions, volunteer opportunities. If you were leading, say you want to, you help to run a security conference. I'm sure there's a number of security conferences in New York, right? If you were like the head of the volunteer group, right? You helped organize it. That's showing project management skills, right? Or you led the talks, or you helped receive all that. There's lots of ways you can volunteer and actually put that on your resume. If you are someone who's more technical, who does open source projects, you identify bugs, you contribute to this, or you help. There's probably ways within open source to contribute that's not just writing code too. Like include those things and talk about the impact of that work. I think a lot of times we just list out like, oh, we do all this stuff, but we don't say what is that impact. The impact of helping run a team's annual planning is you're keeping the team effective, on track, and efficient, right? Like how you're doing that. So I think that's one thing that they called out to me, of really being like objective and talking about your impact versus just the things that you do. You'll use that in your career also when you do your own performance reviews and things like that. So keep that in mind, not just for resumes, but for talking to your boss too. And then also, like, again, showing that you're very interested in this field and how you're going about that. So I think that will often stand out to a bit of like, if you're engaged, if you're volunteering, if you're doing these different things, that can sometimes maybe just be a little extra that maybe will catch someone's eye. Anything to add, Fabiana? And then I know it looks like Fan has her hand up.
Yes, I want to add very quickly that the interviews that have stand out the most for me are the ones when interviewer can't really clearly verbalize why they're interested in X career, cybersecurity, whatever role it is. I want to hear a story. And sometimes I'm always the interviewer that will always ask why. And sometimes there's some answers where they're very canned, like it come out of the internet, very basic, like, well, it seems exciting, or it's like, well, maybe there's something else that will seem exciting in 6 months. And sometimes I want to hear like, what happens that you really want to do this? Because it requires more than just being interested and being like, oh, I came across something and see what happens. So I will focus on crafting your story, similar to what Ozzy said, like you can control your resume, you can control your story. If you don't even know why you're doing all this, then you need to work on it. And that will be my advice before we jump into Fan's question.
Fawn, please go ahead. Oh, Rich, would you be able to unmute Fawn? One second, we're having technical difficulties. Apologies.
Hey.
There we go. Oh, I see you're unmuted again. Are you?
Yeah, hey everyone, thank you so much for the panel. My name is Fan. So I'm a student from NYU. I'm studying cybersecurity right now. So I'm really interested in cybersecurity. So it's very nice to hear all of you guys. And thank you so much for the information, Richard. I write down everything. So I remember you guys all mentioned about like in-person networking. So it's very important to go to know someone. So do you have like certain events you really recommend me to go as a student still in school? And this is the first question. And second question is like, so I still get 1 more year, so I can still get a lot of free time when I'm in school. So what kind of skills do you think is most important to develop before we graduate? Thank you.
If Sarah's not going to unmute, I'm going to plug an organization that she's involved in, which is Women in Cybersecurity. It's an established organization that does a fantastic job at providing different tools and workshops for women in the information security space. That's actually where I met Sarah. And they hold a conference every year, and there are different ways to sort of get sponsored and get some of your conference entry fees covered, and Sarah can speak to a little bit more of that. But that's one opportunity I think that you can take advantage of to get it. It's a little bit twofold, right, or threefold. There's a career fair there where there's a lot of companies there where you can sort of speak to individuals, representatives from the companies directly. You can network and meet other people in the industry, and then some of your peers, other students, and build up your sort of network. And then they have great workshops where you can learn different sort of aspects to the industry. So I would say that's the one area that I would point out as a tool that you can use to sort of help you advance your career.
Yeah, and I can build on that. I'm actually on their board, so thanks for bringing it up, Aussie. So I think there's a number of conferences that are kind of big, huge, established conferences that do have scholarships. So RSA is a big one. Black Hat is a big one. Both though are like 30,000 people, so a little overwhelming. But they are good because if you can get into their security scholarship, it would not pay out of pocket. So do not go spend $2,000 on that. Only, but often students in particular, they have student scholarships. And so these are really good if you are a student to apply. The WESIS conference is focused on women in cybersecurity. Of course, there's allies there, but that's kind of their main focus. There's a lot of scholarships connected with that. You don't have to be a student necessarily, I don't think, to get the scholarship. And that one's very focused on networking and on learning content. And then I can see Fabiana is linking a bunch of other ones there, but I think in New York, I don't know as many, but a few were put here, but I think local events are also a really good way for you to figure out if you're going to try to stay in that area, right, to network locally. And so the couple that we mentioned, there also, if you want to be brave, it's completely different than the rest, but DEF CON, and if anyone wants to go to DEF CON, you can write me. I'll probably be there this year. I've gone. It's a complete opposite of what RSA and Black Hat are, but it's a big giant hacker conference. I don't know if anyone here has heard of it, but it's one of the biggest hacker conference in the world. About, again, 30,000 people go to Vegas. So you also have to deal with Vegas. But if you want to see kind of the cutting edge of what's happening in cybersecurity, it's happening there. So anyone is taking apart anything that is possible to be taken apart. And so it is an interesting place. There is a whole training ongoing because you need to be careful in getting in on Wi-Fi networks and stuff like that. But if you really want to see what people are kind of if you are on that, oh, I really like to break things and figure out why it broke or how I broke it, or I really just want to do ethical hacking and figure this out or protect against all these people that are trying to come in, you'll win a lot of people there. That one's more a t-shirt and hoodie kind of scene, but there's also a lot of side events that will happen with that. So that is a place I would definitely at some point in your career recommend you checking out. I don't know if Fabiana would come for that too, but I do think if you want to see the beginning and kind of the current of cybersecurity, it will be happening there.
Yes, the organizations that I will highlight, I would say they're primarily more local because Sarah and Ozzy just mentioned the big ones. So number one, Latinas in Tech is a not-for-profit organization with presence in New York. They have events virtually and in person, and all of them are free of charge, and everyone is welcome, regardless if you're Latino or not. So go ahead and check the website. That's number one. Number two, Alpha is an organization I looked into years ago, and I was like, I'm not in banking. Now I am. And it happens like they're getting into tech. So 2 months ago, they hosted a tech summit in PA. And I went and I was very impressed. So check them out. If I know if many of you are in colleges, there's chapters in colleges, and there's a ton of support, especially if you're interested to do fintech or you're just exploring. So that's number two. Three, I share a specific meetup, but I will encourage you to look at Meetup and check anything tech related. You will find a lot of opportunities to network, and they're also free of charge. I share specifically the New York Enterprise InfoSec Meetup because I had been there regularly. They host meetups once a month. DEF CON, Sarah covered that. And the last community I want to share is Blue Global. They focus on developing for blockchain. So it's very interesting how they support folks to learn how to hack. You don't need to know anything before joining. So they're really supported specifically to dive into blockchain. So if you want to know more about any of these organizations or any other, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn.
Thank you
And
all so much. Oh, Asi, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say really quick, because I know we have other people with their hand raised,
Right.
but for anybody looking to go to a conference, I think one of the key parts is understanding what you want out of the conference first, right? Because a lot of these conferences are very vendor driven, and you're gonna get bombarded by vendors, and it's sort of like the snake oil salesman, and you're not going to be able to avoid that. And then you're going to, afterwards, your email that you use to sign up for the conference is going to get spammed by all sorts of vendor requests. So, and then some of them, like Sarah mentioned, are really sort of tech focused. And if that's what you're going for, then great. But if that's not what you're going for, I remember my first security conference was RSA, and I walked into a a crypto talk, and about 30 seconds later, I walked out because the first slide was some big mathematic algorithmic formula that once you started talking about it, I was like, oh, wait, this is way over my head. And then went to the next crypto talk, and somebody put up like a huge formula on the screen, and I got up and walked out of that. And there was a guy who was in both of them and laughed at me, sort of smiled at me and snickered when he saw me walk out of the second one as well. So just understand what you're getting into when you sign up for these conferences, and know what's your goal. What do you want to get out of the conference?
Thank you, Asi. I just want everyone to be aware that it is past 7. Panelists, is it okay if we squeeze in one more question? It looks like Irfan has his hand up.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Irfan, please go ahead.
Hey, hi everyone. How's it doing? I have one question, as well as someone talked about certification. So I'm a student at NYU doing my cybersecurity master's degree. And my question is, like, everyone talks here about, and every session or like meetups I do attend talks about networks and having a good network. So I myself personally is an introvert. So what is the place for the introvert in the cybersecurity and how it impacts? And the second thing I wanted to like put on regarding certification, I'm doing my master's in cybersecurity. I've done Security Plus, and I've been just enrolled in Blue Team certification. So as someone talked about, the most of the certifications, every content or the labs, each and everything is mostly available for free. So whatever I'm getting in the Blue Team cert and this CompTIA Security Plus, most of them are the same as available in the Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. So anyone who cannot afford, or like they want to just enrich their knowledge and experience on lab and zone, so they can just like try Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. Those are like better than even the content for the network and these all stuff. Thank you.
I don't want to be the one to go first every time. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I was going to try, but I was going to just say, I'll try to give introvert advice as a major extrovert, though. So just take it with a grain of salt, Irfan. I mean, I think maybe focusing in more on the online communities. I mean, there's a lot of places online to interact with folks. And also, take the conference, pick one talk you want to go to, and engage with that talk, and maybe write to that person afterwards. Maybe focus the conference not always on just having a chit chat, but kind of just absorbing the content that you're listening to. Sitting there doesn't require you as much maybe to feel like you're pushing out or making yourself uncomfortable. And so that might be how I would do it. But yeah, I think maybe the online communities, there's a lot of places that people interact in this field online, so maybe focusing in more a bit there would be a place. But I'm not sure, Asi or Fabiana, if you have better advice.
I'm also an introvert, and so I definitely feel the pain that you're going through, Irfan. The good news is that this industry is, I'm sure, heavily populated by a bunch of introverts. But the bad news is that if you want to sort of advance your career, then you're going to have to push yourself outside of your normal zone, your comfort zone. And to Fabiana's point, when she first opened, like networking, and Sarah's also mentioned it, like networking is really important. And you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and network with other people. And So, and there are many different ways to do that. You know, we've talked about a lot of them, conferences and meetups, and there are also ways to do that within the information security industry through like information sharing organizations like FSISAC or other types of like intel sharing groups and organizations. So there are many different avenues for you to sort of explore to get yourself a little bit more out there with other people.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your friend. And I think it's an important topic to talk about, like challenges, right, as individuals to diving into the market. I will advise to strive to be a domain expert. What I mean by that is when you select an area of the industry and you really know it very well, and that's something you can control. Let's say it's cloud security. You're very good at that. People will reach out to you. Little by little, it's kind of like you feel comfortable with that topic, but maybe not interactive with them. But at least the topic is something that you feel very good. So that could be a good starting point. And second, I always advise people to network in a way that is authentic and comfortable for you. There's everything under the sun. There is an event that I have on my calendar. I've never been, but it's at 8 a.m. Cybersecurity people getting together. There is 8 p.m. events happening as well for cybersecurity people. There's under the sun everything, so that you don't have to feel like, oh, I have to go to that networking, that happy hour, that rooftop, that conference. So little by little, test out. Because I told her, for example, at a conference, 3 days going away is very overwhelming. So starting virtually could be good, or doing something that's authentic to you. And an example I will give you is, I connected with a cybersecurity professional about 6 months ago. We connected virtually, and then she told me, "Hey, I'm going to New York. Would you like to meet next week?" I was like, "Sure," but I'm tired of the coffee chats, so I told her, like, let's do something else, and we ended up in a jazz club. It was amazing. Now she moved to the city, and we walk around the city, and we go to parks, and we talk about work, but that's authentic to me. I like walking around, going to parks, going jazz clubs, and that's how I network. So that would be my advice.
Thank you all so much. And Irfan, I too am an introvert, so I totally feel you on this. So before we end today's session, I'm wondering, panelists, if you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today.
I can go first. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. I mean, you're taking the first steps, right? You're showing up, you're getting interested, you're hearing from people in the field who've had different journeys. So I would just, encourage you to continue on that, figure out, what space you're more interested in, and go from there. And just remember that life will drive you different ways, right? And so will the internet. And so who knows when the next big thing's going to happen. And if you're up for it, like wherever you are, jump on that challenge, right? Cybersecurity is more integrated into every single thing that it ever has, even in the 6 years I've been in the field. It's like bigger and bigger, connected to things like climate change up to your cell phone, right? Or your earbuds. So no, there's a lot of opportunity from giant places to smaller companies that need to be thinking about this in the public sector, nonprofit sector, and private. So be open to opportunities, and I wish you all the luck, and feel free to connect. And I'm gonna mic share to Fabiana.
Thank you, Sarah. Number one, persist. It's not easy, but you can do it. Number two, it is a ride, total journey, so enjoy it. One thing will take you to another. It's very hard to predict what is the next thing. But if you take it as a ride, I think it would be best for all of you. What about you, Elsie?
You know, you can go down the list and reiterate a bunch of the stuff that we've already said. But I think the one thing that when Irfan brought up the introvert piece that I thought about is mental health is really important, and it's really important in this industry. This industry is one where it will, it's fast paced. Like I said before, when I mentioned like the role of a CISO, you have very little control over like when it's a fire drill day and when it's like a holiday weekend and all of a sudden you're working over a holiday weekend. And I think it's important that you prioritize your mental health and consider that. And Irfan, that also goes for, when you're being an introvert, when you run out of your people juice, as I call it, it's okay to be, like, hey, listen, I need some time to myself, and prioritize that and make sure you're taking care of yourself and everything else that Sarah and Fabiana has said as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to you all. And thank you all for coming. And yeah, my LinkedIn is up there as well. So if anybody wants to reach out, just give me a shout.
Thank you so much, everyone. Panelists, Fabiana, Sarah, Aussie, thank you so much for sharing your insights with the team. And our audience members, thank you so much for giving up your Monday evening to be here today. And this concludes today's panel. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.